So much. This is the March edition of Kubernetes Meet Our Contributors. We have a huge panel for you today. That's awesome. It is 7:30 in the morning where I am. I have a disco ball up because I am trying to get with the program today. So enjoy my disco ball in the background. So first, before we get into things, we're going to do a round of intros. Yes, of course, we do have a code of conduct. Please be excellent to each other. That is for our panelists as well as anybody that's in the Meet Our Contributors Slack channel, asking me questions on Twitter, or really anywhere else that you're conversing with us. Please be awesome to each other. Yes, we do accept anonymous questions. That's actually how most of the questions come in. Feel free to DM me on Slack, the name right here in the corner. There is a second Paris now on Kubernetes Slack, and she does have the other Paris, so that is not the right Paris. But anyway, questions to my DMs or in the chat, and we can chat with you. Pretty much everything's on the table today, so what that means, you can ask them anything you would ask a mentor. That's what the purpose of today is. A lot of these folks are super swamped and don't necessarily have time to talk to all 40,000 people on a one-on-one basis for contributors. So they're here asking questions in a office hours type setting. So let's do a round of intros really quick. First person, though, that I do want to introduce is George, George C. George is doing our VJ, as I call it, from back in the MTV days. He is streaming for us. George unfortunately has bronchitis. Everybody tell George feel better.
Feel better, George.
And thanks for streaming for us today. And if anybody has any issues with the stream, yell at George. That includes audio. So if you can't hear us ever during the next hour, please ping us on Slack. All right. And then next on my screen is Taylor. Why don't you give us a brief intro, who you are, what you do, why Kubernetes?
Hey, everybody. So fantastic questions. I'm always prepared to answer those. My name is Taylor Dolezal. I work for a very large media company. I'll let you figure that one out. There's a fun trivia fact. I work mostly with site reliability engineering teams. I absolutely love Kubernetes. I started getting involved with the release team as of release 1.14, which is about a year ago. And I found a just vibrant, loving, engaging community to work with. And I just have not been able to get away. Not that I'm trying to, just it's just so much fun to work with everyone here. My favorite color is red. And my favorite thing right now is the 1.18 release that is going to drop very soon.
Yeah, congrats.
What?
Release team. We're still rolling through releases. All right, Bart, who are you? What are you doing? Why Kubernetes?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Bart Snikla, and I'm open source engineer at VMware, and I'm also part and co-chair of infra working group at Kubernetes. And I'm actually full-time working at Kubernetes from more than a year. And why Kubernetes? Because this is a very demanding, very interesting project, which has actually a lot of technologies inside. So and I'm always love like a good communities. So that's why.
Aww. And Christoph, who are you? I mean, I know you, but who are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? Why Kubernetes?
Hello, everyone. My name is Christoph Blecker. I am a technical lead for SIG Contributor Experience. I'm also a sitting member of the Kubernetes Steering Committee. I've been involved with Kubernetes now for about 4 years. My day job is I'm involved with site reliability engineering at Red Hat. Why Kubernetes? I got involved like a lot of people did, just trying to learn about running Kubernetes. And found some interesting bugs and then tried to fix them. Some of them were successful, some of them I fell on my face, but I learned and stuck around for the community.
Well, you just stuck around because there's a lot of Destiny fans here and you like playing Destiny. So that's why Christoph stuck around. Christoph is the Destiny questions. Direct all Destiny questions to Christoph. All right, last but not least, Tim.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Hawken. I work at Google. I've been working on Kubernetes more or less from the beginning, since before it was open source. I'm involved mostly in SIG network and SIG multi-cluster these days, though previously I've spent a lot of time in SIG node and SIG storage. And I also spend a lot of time in working group infrastructure with Bart and making some progress there finally, yay. Why Kubernetes? One day I had a nightmare and I woke up wondering what the heck I was going to do with my career when I left Google one day and didn't have Borg anymore. And so I thought I would exfiltrate all that technology before I eventually leave Google one day. Not that I have any plans.
You know, all these years, and I've never heard it that way before.
It's really true. It's really true.
Yeah.
I mean, not the exfiltration part, but the nightmare.
Well, and tell folks about Star Wars.
I
will probably get a Star Wars question. I already have one queued. So
when I'm not Kuberneting, I am either consuming some piece of Star Wars lore, or playing with Legos with my kids, or playing with Star Wars Legos.
We bring our whole selves here. All right. Now, first question is from a new contributor, and they're asking about what you think is the best onboarding path. Clearly, there's a few. You know, we always hear from folks like, what SIG do we join, for instance? This is not that question. This is more of a, what onboarding paths have you seen in Kubernetes contributing that work really well to get folks up to speed?
So the standard advice that I give people who want to contribute is to start reading. There's more code than we know what to do with, and for every line of code, there's probably 0.1 bugs or things that need fixing. So if you pick a subsystem that you're interested in, and you just start reading how the components of that subsystem work, you are inevitably going to find something that you don't like, whether that's poorly commented code or poorly named functions or things that need to be refactored or straight up bugs. And you can start by just fixing the little things. And as you build up a body of those little things, you start to understand what the actual components are doing. And pretty quickly you find the bigger, more substantial things, and you're able to participate in the harder conversations that often happen through the GitHub issues, where you might not have had the context before, but now since you've spent, you know, a dozen hours reading the code, now you understand what the heck people are talking about. That sounds like the hard way, but it's, for me, the way I get into anything new. I start at the ground.
I think that also what I would like to add is to showing our meetings, because very often there are topics which we discuss are particularly important during that time, and maybe direction in which we are going forward. And also, if you want to contribute, you want to be visible too. If you want to find some mentor, if you want to, you know, show that you are capable or able to help in some particular area, it is a great place to be, to just join our weekly or bi-weekly meetings.
Where do people find out about the meetings usually?
So I think that a great place is always Slack, starting to Slack. Very often the working groups or SIGs or have some information, crucial information in their topics. So I'm sure that there's at least one channel for every effort in working group, etc.
I think the regular meetings are all documented in the SIGs YAML too, right? Or at least in that same directory.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I just wanted to give some context for folks. And then Taylor, or actually Christoph, I'm sorry, I thought that was Taylor. Christoph, what about you? What do you think is good onboarding outside of the examples that Tim and Bart gave?
The main thing that I'd add would be stick like if you're just starting out in Kubernetes, it's a really big project. It's a really big code base. And even outside of things that are just like core Kubernetes, it's a big ecosystem. And there's all sorts of software projects around Kubernetes that build on top of Kubernetes. The best advice that I can give is if you're wanting to get involved is start where is most logical for you. So if your background is I'm a software engineer specializing in a particular kind of software, start there. Like if you're interested in like controller mechanisms, if you're interested in developing clients, start there. If you are an operator that's running Kubernetes, start in the places where they're dealing with things like that are running Kubernetes or deploying Kubernetes, like tools like kubeadm. If you start where you already have some knowledge, then Kubernetes, like when you actually start digging into the code, you'll at least have like a little bit of starting ground, so it's not completely foreign to you. And then from there, you can easily branch into other parts of the code base of the project, and just kind of keep pulling on that knowledge string.
Can I add one thing to that? I agree completely. The way that I came to be part of Borg in the first place was because I was working on machine level software, and that sort of moved up into the bottom half of the Borg stack. And just by being involved in that area that I knew a lot about, I grew up and up and up into the stack. So I agree completely with what Christoph just said. Start where you're familiar and expand.
I feel like we should put that on the top of the contributor guide. Anyway, there is a couple questions. I'm actually getting a flood of questions right now, which is awesome. Again, if you're just joining us and you'd like to ask a question, please reach out to us in the Meet Our Contributors Slack channel on the Kubernetes instance. And if you're joining and are like, I am not in the Kubernetes Slack channel because I'm on Twitter and I am clicking around, that's slack.cates.io. So go ahead and insert our 90,000 person party. And the next question has to do with, of course, time management. This is a question that we get, I'm not kidding you, every time we do this. We've been doing it at least 30 times now. I think, honestly, we probably should just build this into your intros, which is, how do you manage your time? There's so much going on with the project. Obviously, some of us are full-time, some of us are not. So I'm very curious to hear from all of you, all four of you. And Taylor, if you want to start, I saw you come off mute. How do you manage your time with the project, with whatever else you've got going on?
Absolutely. No, it's a fantastic question, and one I've heard quite a bit too. My experience with Kubernetes is such that, so I do have a 9-to-5 job. And when I work on Kubernetes, it's typically, either at lunchtime or before or after work. And really, it's just, again, +1 to the previous answers on where do you start, because that will definitely play into how you chop up the time for your day. I'd started working with the release teams as a shadow, and that was a great starting place for me because that, the tasks weren't things that took multiple hours at first to knock out. And so I was able to kind of take, cherry pick the different things that made sense for me and come up to speed over the course of, several months. And then at that point in time, then I got a little bit of my footing understood, and I was able to understand what additional things I could pull down and what things I could work on. And so I definitely, if that's your situation, that's my recommendation.
I love the question. Can I go next?
Yeah, please, Bart, go.
I love the question because the people who knows me knows that I'm always working with that kind of thing. And
wow, can we see that again? That was organized. That's like organized and nice. Look at that. That's like GitHub issues, but
you can see it here, but this is actually the bullet journal.
It's a relic. What is a journal?
Which helped me a lot. And what I'm doing, I'm actually an early bird. So every day I'm waking up around 4 a.m. So my day starts, I'm lucky enough to be full-time employee to work at Kubernetes at this point. But when I'm starting, I'm just preparing every step what I want to achieve during the day. So I'm trying to make the tasks, goals to be very small, to have some kind of satisfaction that I finished, for example, 80% of my goals for this day. And the goals are actually not only related with Kubernetes, but my personal goals, my meetings, my kind of mentoring sessions or meetings like that right now. And for me, I wouldn't say, even after the year which I already spent at Kubernetes, that I understand everything. It is like I understand maybe around 5 or 10% of the process, and every day I learn something new. So what I would like to add to this point is everybody is overwhelmed at some point. So don't worry about it. It's just do one small step at a time.
Very good advice. Christoph, what about you?
So I'll start by answering that this is still a process for me. Trying to manage my time. So when I started working on Kubernetes, I was working for a large entertainment company as well, very similar to Taylor's situation. But I was operating Kubernetes. So I started where I was learning about Kubernetes and doing things as a part of my day job. But then as I got more and more involved in the community, there's a lot of things I started doing that were outside my day job because I was interested in learning, interested in developing my skills and going just a little bit further than the stuff that I could fit into my workday. That kind of snowballed into where most of the stuff that I was doing was unrelated to my day job, and I was doing a lot of things after hours, and had to kind of strike a balance between how much Kubernetes work was I doing in a day and actually getting paid for, and how much Kubernetes work was I doing because I was just really interested and passionate about the project, and trying to strike a balance between the two. I have been fortunate enough. I now have a day job where I have part of my time is dedicated to upstream Kubernetes, working for Red Hat. There's a lot of my job still to this day that is not directly related to upstream. And the vast majority of my day job is unrelated to upstream, but I continue to be passionate about it. And Kubernetes not only can open doors for your career, as it definitely has me, but there's so much to learn. There's like really smart people that you get to learn from, including like everybody in this chat right now. I've learned something from everybody here along the way, and it's definitely a process to learn what the right balance is for you when you're spending your personal time doing something like open source. But it is like, I believe in the work that we're doing. I believe that in a lot of our corporate, like a lot of our values, like project over company. And because of those, I'm motivated to make time, like carve out time of my personal time to go and make things better for the project, and for the thing that we're delivering. So it's an ongoing thing to try and like strike the right balance when you're carving out personal time, but there are definitely benefits when you find that right balance.
And Tim, you obviously work full time on the project, but I mean, you clearly have other passion areas and other shiny objects going on that make you want to contribute after hours. So how are you managing your time?
Yeah, everybody's been really philosophical here, so I'll go the other direction and get a little bit concrete. Actually, I really like Bart's approach, and I've started to take a little bit more of it myself. The short answer to how do I manage my time is badly. I tend to get into reactive mode when I'm overloaded, and I use my email inbox as my primary to-do list, which is great until my email provider inevitably changes some feature that I was using that nobody else in the world uses, and now it doesn't work the way I need it to work anymore. Not that this happened last week. So, I use my email box as sort of the canonical to-do list, which is why if you send me a GitHub issue and you don't assign it to me, I probably won't see it because it gets lost in the flood. But every week I come in on Monday now and I try to fill a sticky note with the things I want to accomplish this week. And it forces me to sort of scan my inbox, look at all the things that are actively in flight, apply some priority function to it so I don't get into purely reactive mode. And then when I start to look at my mailbox and go, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can say, okay, well, number one on the list was this. Okay, let's look for any emails related to this. Okay, topics, to-dos, bugs assigned to me, docs that need reviewing, and focus on those things in priority order. And that helps me bring a little bit of sanity. So I'm not quite as rigorous as Bart, where I do it every day or keep it in a journal. I intentionally do it on sticky notes so that at the end of the week, I throw it away and I start over. And I've got sort of a master list where I'm drawing things from. And the truth is, half the master list is never going to get done. Not by me anyway.
That was a good one. So what you're famous for having GitHub notifications and email triggers and all kinds of stuff. How does everyone else manage your GitHub notifications and review requests and things like that? Do you use Tim's methodology that that Tim was so kind to write up? And I think we even have it PR'd somewhere in the community repo at this point. If you're listening and are like, how does Tim manage his mail filters? I think we have that PR'd somewhere in. Christoph or Bart just came off mute.
Christoph, go ahead.
Yeah, like the primary tool that I'm using right now to triage what is the most important is a tool called Octobox, octobox.io. It's free for if you're using it for like public open source repositories. There is kind of a paid tier, but it's free if you're using it for open source repositories like Kubernetes. And the nice thing that I like about Octobox is, so it pulls in all of your notifications into one view, but then you can really apply some like layered filtering to it. So I can easily scrub out, okay, notifications for things where I'm subscribed to an issue because I've like manually checked that I've subscribed, versus assigned, versus somebody's requested my review, versus somebody's just like asking me a question. I can also filter out things like issues that are closed, PRs that are merged. If I don't need to look at them again, I can just quickly archive them and filter them out. And I can also prioritize notifications based on like repository groups and that kind of stuff. So you can create like, you can either toggle different buttons to say like, okay, I want things that are passing, things that are already LGTM, and things that might just need my approval. I can toggle things like specific orgs. So I'm switching between like the OpenShift org for my day job or the Kubernetes org for open source work. There's some like decent filtering features and that kind of stuff to try and like stem the flood. I've been doing this for maybe like 8 months or so, and this is probably the best way that I've done it thus far, but I'm always kind of looking for a better way to kind of manage the flood notifications.
What is it?
Yeah, this is today's best at least that I found. So, but it's definitely a thing, because as soon as you get, the more involved you get, then the more things are mentioned on, and the more owners files you're in, the more things you get assigned. So there's a double-edged sword there. When you get more involved, more work just seems to land on your desk.
And we do have quite a few new participants that are joining us. Thanks for joining us today. If you are joining us from Twitter or Slack, this is Kubernetes Meet Our Contributors. Again, I am Paris, the hostess for this month, with our awesome panelists here who I consider mentors. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the Meet Our Contributors chat or DM me. All right. Taylor and Bart, what are y'all doing with your notifications and how do you manage your reviews?
So I was struggling with that topic.
And that's fine. I think we're all learning that in open source. I think anytime I go to an open source event, seems to be a topic.
Actually,
we're all just kind of learning from each other. Go ahead, Bart.
What actually helped me a lot are two things. One is to actually start using these to put the more important things here. And the other one, I don't know if it's actually still in beta, is the new dashboard for notifications at GitHub, which is really, really, maybe not the best, but it's much better than it was before. And at least it can mark some issues, some pull requests and topics as resolved or not resolved. So I know that in the future, I will have to look at those again. And what I'm doing differently is I'm not using my email for GitHub notification. I actually have like a 90% of those put immediately to archive, because it was impossible for me to be able even to read most of them. The other thing is I completely unsubscribed from the repositories, projects, which I know are good to be there, but not crucial at this time, because it was just too much information. I was losing a lot of these important topics. So I focused my efforts at like our working group, our like important for me, or interesting, very interesting to me, where I'm able to help in the project most of the time. So it at least helped me to improve my kind of behavior in that area a little bit.
Does anybody want to admit to still watching a repo?
I have published sort of how I operate. I like my Gmail. I watch the Kubernetes repo, but I auto archive everything that's not assigned to me. Actually, if it's assigned to me, or if I think if I created it myself, or if I've commented in the thread, then it gets marked as P1 in my mailbox. But P1s tend to get manually archived pretty quickly because they pile up really fast. But I do watch it. And the main reason is when I inevitably get assigned an issue, then I have the full history in my email box instead of having to go to GitHub to pull in the context.
I still watch a few repos, namely like the community repo. And there's a couple kind of meta repos that we have that store like infrastructure information. So one is the Kubernetes/org repo that handles all of the like GitHub permissions for everyone, and the Kubernetes/Kates.io repo that handles a lot of our meta infrastructure like DNS and group permissions, that kind of stuff. So I keep an eye on what's going on in those repos, even for things that are not directly assigned to me, because they're pieces of our infrastructure, or like the community repo itself, which has all of our meta stuff. So like, you know, chairs and technical lead changes and things like that. But the one other thing that I wanted to add after like listening to Bart is, so as far as managing email notifications, so I go the other direction because I'm using a tool. I shut off email notifications completely. GitHub does not email me unless there is, the only thing that I have on that comes into my email inbox is security issues, because I know those need to be addressed in like an extremely timely manner. So those drop straight into my inbox. But otherwise, like mentions, assigns, everything else does not hit my email inbox. I use my email for, these are critical, urgent things that I actually need to attend to in a timely manner. Anything that doesn't fit that bill doesn't hit my inbox, or I have some sort of inbox rule to archive it out. because I just don't want to deal with the noise. That's my like critical notification path. So cheat sheet, if you need to get in touch with me and it's like time sensitive, email is definitely a decent way to do that because that's where my critical notification path is.
Okay, Paris asked me to show you maybe this dashboard for GitHub. So let me do it. This one moment, please.
And to give context for folks that are watching, Bart's going to pull up a tool that our end prod teams have created for the contributors to help us with this management.
Actually, I think that my Mac is not letting me to do that. I have to.
Okay, well, we'll pause. We'll pause and come back. No worries. All right. The next question is from a current contributor. And the question is, what's the secret sauce on finding reviewers? And yes, they completely understand the owner's file process and want to know what and they called out Tim specifically and others, of course. So they would love to know your secret sauce in finding reviewers that review in a timely fashion.
It's very easy. Just show at the meeting and ask directly. It is the fastest way I found to get it.
Okay, so we've got one. Bart says show up to a meeting. All right, what's next?
Well,
Tim?
my secret is I just don't write any code anymore.
Ooh,
Or I ping Christoph on my issues and they get done. No, I agree actually with Bart. It's easy to ignore an email or a notification. It's much harder to ignore somebody when they're talking to you. I also try to name people by name because it's harder to ignore a message when you're specifically named as opposed to it being thrown into the ether of random people.
So name someone.
Yeah.
All right. Christoph, I think you came off mute.
So depending on the space that you're working in, it can be either more or less difficult to find a reviewer. It also depends on like if you're familiar with the owner's file process and how reviewers and stuff work there. You can kind of trace down who should be reviewing or which SIG is involved. The one kind of caveat that I'd add there is like we're all busy. Like everybody on this project is busy. There's not a single person involved, a single person that I've talked to on this project that isn't busy in some fashion because, as we mentioned earlier in the call, there's like not everybody does this for their day job. Some people do. So some people like do work their 9 to 5 and are available. We also have different time zones. So like what is somebody's 9 to 5 is different for folks around the world. So yeah, it can be difficult to sometimes it can be difficult to attend meetings. Not everybody can. A lot of our meetings are North American centric. So if you can attend a meeting, that's good. Pinging on Slack is another kind of good way, either like in a SIG channel or if the bot has suggested a particular reviewer or a particular approver you're trying to get involved in, sending them a friendly private message and saying like, hey, I don't know if you missed this. Would you mind taking a look at this when you get a chance? The other thing is that I would say across the board is, again, because we're all busy and we're all humans at the end of this, please be respectful when you're engaging other folks, whether it's in a SIG, like an actual open SIG channel, or even if you are interrupting somebody by like going into their private messages, or if you are like bringing something up in a SIG meeting, like take that extra breath of like, yes, your PR is important and should be reviewed, and everything should be reviewed in a timely manner. And something I'm passionate about, being involved in contributor experience. But also it's important to recognize that the folks that you're engaging are busy people, and being like friendly and respectful when you're engaging them that goes a long way. If somebody comes to me and says like, hey, I'm a first time contributor, I'm kind of lost, I've got this PR, it says to like ping you, can you point me in the right direction? I will make the time probably a little bit quicker if somebody just like no message or says like, you know, hey, like you haven't got to this and is a little bit more terse with me. Not to say that I'll play favorites, but like I will spend my personal time helping and mentoring a new contributor if they take that extra time to like be human with me. And I think that goes in all directions. Like I do the exact same thing if I'm asking for somebody for help, because that's really what it is as opposed to like the expectation that somebody should review. Like you're asking for help. And if you're friendly and respectful, like most folks here are like good, friendly people that are just very busy.
I'll add, for people who get assigned me or need my review, pinging me on Slack is totally okay. I try not to operate in interrupt mode too often, but truthfully, things get lost. And if you are stuck and you're waiting for me, it's totally cool to ping me on Slack. I'm not guaranteeing an answer, but at least Slack gives me a second order signal.
Tim, the 50,000 people watching this just pinged you on Slack.
I'll add them to the queue.
Next Meet Our Contributors, Tim comes on. He's like, don't Slack me. That's going to be the next one. All right. And Taylor, what about you?
So I'd say definitely agree with everybody here. I'd say that me personally, I always kind of follow a logical escalation path in terms of, you know, trying to @ someone or their group on GitHub. If I don't hear back, then reach out to them in Slack, reach out to the mailing lists, and then just kind of like slowly escalate, ask friends of friends that might work with that person, etc., and then just kind of ramp it up that way. But yeah, hopefully I've never gotten to the point where I've had to, you know, bug the steering committee or anybody like that. So never gotten to that point.
All right, I've got a few current and aspiring contributors with a very similar-ish question. So I'm going to kind of lump it in and see if we catch both. Both current and aspiring obviously want to know where to contribute to. The current folks are more curious about what areas of the project that you all are working in now that need help with current contributors. So if you want, talk about the area of the project that you're most involved in and where both new and current contributors can jump in and help you right now, or either this week or today or this hour, etc.
So I spend a lot of my time in Signet. Signet has a very long backlog of issues and bugs. Signet is not the best place for a person to jump in new. It actually requires a fair amount of context, and a lot of the issues there are fairly detailed and subtle. And I get a lot of people who come in literally every week and say, I really like networking, can I get involved in networking? And I generally fail to find good starter issues in that space. On the other hand, every time I go try out the new features, like literally the project is so big, I read the change log and go try the new features, and because I don't know what's going on half the time. And every time I use new features, I find something weird. So I think like UX, CLI, those sorts of things are always looking for extra hands. There's always more work to do than people. And I think those are actually fairly approachable places, even if you're just filing bugs.
What about if the person has been on the project for a year or so and they're looking for a new SIG? What's going on in network that you might be able to use a current contributor skills?
Sure. So SIG Network does have a ton of work to do. A lot of it is sort of entangled. There's a lot of cleanups, refactorings. There's a bunch of in-flight work. Actually, SIG Network is busier now than maybe it's ever been in terms of number of projects and KEPs and ideas that are coming through. So there's always the need for people who can bring understanding and knowledge and just come and review and think about and try to look at these problems. And I'm happy to point people in the right direction if they are coming in and they want to jump in SIG Network. It's not that the waters are filled with sharks. It's just that sometimes we haven't warmed them up appropriately.
Yeah, I've actually met a couple of researchers lately too that are studying networking topics. Do you welcome folks doing research topics and that kind of thing for you?
Absolutely. There's nobody that I'll say no to. Like there's no bad work. If there's anything that people are interested in, come in and do it. I can't say that everything that people bring will be the sort of thing we want to fold into the project. But you know, there's the core of the project. There's all the adjacent work that people are doing. And then there's other projects that are ecosystem, and I'm happy to encourage or help along any of those.
Cool. And then what about you, Bart? Both aspiring and current help wanted, if you will.
I think that at this point is the hardest question to at least today, because I don't have a good answer for that. Because I would love to say there is a lot of work in infra working group. It's true, but I'm failing a little bit to like prepare one single source of truth for the newcomers, where to find all informations which are needed, because this is a very broad topic and which are needed for people to just at least get knowledge about how is it working and what needs to be done. So at this point, I'm kind of cautious about that topic, and I'm pushing, and I will be pushing much more this kind of process of preparing better documentation of the overall process.
Does that mean you might need tech writers?
Of course, about that, this is always what skills you need to have is definitely be patient and don't afraid to poke people, because this is like a so broad topic and so many stakes, so many projects are being involved inside that we need to write documentation, but it's sometimes so complex and so many things are being involved that it needs time. But definitely, if anyone wants to help with documentation, I'm very open.
I want to jump in and like 300% agree with Bart. Documentation is something that is a consistent need in every single part of this project. And it's not just SIG-Docs, which I love SIG-Docs, and I love the folks that handle like our website and the documentation and the things that we publish like very forward and very publicly. And if you ever are working through anything on Kubernetes.io and it doesn't make sense to you, please help us by fixing it. But documentation, in addition to the stuff that's going on in SIG-Docs, documentation is something that every single part of this project needs and uses every single day. So if you encounter something and it's either poorly documented or not documented at all, and you're wondering like, hey, if I learn this, should I write this down? That is something that will definitely get you like props in every single part of this community, because it's always something that, you know, we try as best as we can to write things down, but we sometimes miss things, or we're coming at it from a different perspective of like, hey, there's a bunch of knowledge that I know that's already up in my head that like, of course, everybody knows this, but that's not necessarily the case. So yes, docs, writing things down, those PRs are always, always appreciated.
And you don't have to be a technical writer to write these docs. A lot of this is, I talked to 5 people and I accumulated 5 bits of information that are all related to each other. Maybe there ought to be a README somewhere that includes all 5 of them.
It sounds like you're also advocating for maybe some help with project management and organization in general. You too, Bart, do you feel like that would be helpful if folks are out there that are like, hey, we can organize?
Definitely, but you need to be aware also how open source is working, and it's a little bit different than project management at like a
100%. Yeah, 100%.
It's not like you can force or somebody to do something. You need to be very kind of sometimes delicate about it, and definitely there is a need for And at least I feel like everybody would, at least me, would love to learn some processes in project management. I don't have experience in that area. So definitely the people who can teach us, who can also join these efforts as a kind of project managers, etc. Yeah.
Well, we have 9 minutes left. Let's end on a high note, which is always open-ended feedback to the community. If there's one tip or trick or piece of advice that you have for the contributor community right now, what would that be? And then we're done with the show. And who wants to go first?
I'll go. I spend a good portion of my time now reading KEPs. KEPs are becoming increasingly critical to the project, right? We're at this point where we can't really afford to be the Wild West where anybody works on anything they want to work on. And the KEP process is lightweight enough that I don't feel bad asking people to stop their engineering work and go do some writing work, explaining what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it, and why they're not doing that obvious thing that seems like it would be simpler, but has been rejected by them in their brain, but they haven't told anybody. This, to me, like as a tip, focusing on good design docs is really critical. And this stage of the project, I think we're so delicately balanced that we have to spend more energy up front.
I would like to add one more thing because I completely agree with that. And I would say that improve the communication, because I feel like we all like to write code, to do new features, to improve some stuff, fix some stuff, but we very often forget about communication, about translating, about like showing what we are doing, why we are doing that, and what are the benefits, potential pitfalls. So because we think everybody knows that already, but I feel like in that area, more communication is, there's not maybe differently. It's not bad to have more communication that is needed.
Taylor, what about you?
I would say it really got me thinking. I'd say that the best tip that I could give you is just if you join Kubernetes and as you kind of come up to speed, and even if you've been working in Kubernetes for a long time, it's always good to kind of reconcile with your heart and see, what are your motivations for doing it. There's something that comes to mind that Kelsey Hightower said a little bit ago. It's, don't focus on getting the high score and all the points. If you're doing it for those reasons, they typically won't end up too well for you. But if you are focused on, you really care about getting that feature in or working with the team to make something happen, then your results are going to spread like wildfire. You're really going to light people up and pull more people into solving that problem with you.
Christoph.
The tip that I would give is provide feedback, and in particular, come talk to us in contributor experience. So when I started getting involved in the Kubernetes project, there were definitely, about 4 years ago, there was definitely rough patches in the process to getting involved. There's different rough patches today. Well, maybe some still, but the point being that contributor experience is a group of folks that are dedicated and passionate about making that, when you're contributing something to the Kubernetes project, whether you're new or experienced, that is as painless for you as possible. it's still open source. You're going to need to advocate for changes and that kind of stuff, but through either automation, policies, human processes, better communication, all that kind of stuff, like we try to improve that process as we go through. So if you have feedback, good, bad, suggestions on improvement, like come talk to us either in Slack, SigContribX, or we we meet twice a month. We have plenty of sub projects that get into things like mentoring. Like this call, for example, is being run by Contributor Experience. So we do these kind of things to make that path as smooth as we can. We don't always get it right, but we're always looking for ways to improve that. So come give us feedback. That would be my tip.
Plus one, Christoph and the Contribx team are phenomenal. Even for somebody who's been around as long as I have, we come up with new ideas based on how we work, and the Contribx team listens and tries to figure out how to make stuff happen. They're awesome. Just to put it in context, we've sort of self-assembled one of the larger engineering organizations in the world to work on this project. There's no way we're going to escape this without tooling and focus on sort of meta work.
I paid him to say that. Anyway. All right. That ends the show today. I do want to end it on an announcement, though. An announcement just dropped. It just came through Twitter. Kubecon Amsterdam has now been rescheduled. If you have tickets to Amsterdam, I repeat, it has now been rescheduled. Please look at all of the major comms from CNCF and from the Kubernetes Twitter accounts and things like that. We will, it looks like, see you possibly in July or August, TBD, but of course, KubeCon Boston is still going on, hopefully in November. So that wraps our show. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Panelists, if you want to stick around and chat afterwards, feel free. Otherwise, I will see everyone same time next month. And also, we are going to do the addition of a second Meet Our Contributors for later time zone folks, or just other time zone folks, rather, so that they can participate too. Thank you so much for joining us today. And that's all. See you.
Thanks, everyone.